We're at an interesting time for Call of Duty right now. For over 20 years, the franchise has delivered nearly non-stop yearly releases and has strived to one-up itself year after year. Sometimes it's succeeded in doing so, other times it's failed miserably. In 2025, the jury's still out on how things are going to go, but many are not expecting much from this year's entry. Part of that is because of the competition that Black Ops 7 is stacked up against, and part of it is because of how Black Ops 6 turned out. After 2 back-to-back Modern Warfare years thanks to Infinity Ward and Sledgehammer Games, players were ready for something a little different in 2024. Initially, Treyarch's Black Ops 6 seemed to be ready to deliver what they were looking for. Treyarch was moving away from the slower, more grounded style of Modern Warfare and promising quicker action and movement. On that front, they absolutely delivered. The all-new Omni movement system now allows players to move and dive in virtually any direction at full sprint, making it easier to pull off crazy clutch moves and outplay your opponents in multiplayer. While players were initially happy with the more frenetic action provided in Black Ops 6, with certain playlists even being dedicated to small close-quarters maps, it seems that things have soured a bit in the post-release environment. Admittedly, I've not kept up on everything Black Ops 6, as I lost major interest a few months in and have spent my recent gaming time going through my backlog and playing some old classics. But what I do know is that there's a growing number of players dissatisfied with the crazy number of crossover skins that are breaking the immersion of the world. It's one thing throwing in a character like the Replacer in the game, he's a marketing mascot. But the Ninja Turtles, Beavis and Butthead, and American Dad characters? Really? While I've been complaining about these aspects of Call of Duty's monetization scheme for years now, it seems many others are beginning to feel similarly and have declared enough is enough. That, amongst a myriad of other complaints about the post-release support, seem to be prompting change where it matters, as Treyarch has vowed to dial back the craziness in Black Ops 7 and return to a more consistent and grounded art style. But while that's great for the multiplayer aspect, there doesn't seem to be much hope for Black Ops 7's campaign. But the story this year seemed to focus on a return of Raul Menendez and diving deeper into the more trippy side of the Black Ops universe. Many of the reactions I've observed from players has been an eye roll at best and utter disdain at worst. But is 2025's campaign doomed to failure like many think it is? Well, to answer that, let's take a look at the recent past. For the first time in Call of Duty history, a developer finally has had more than 3 years to make a video game in Black Ops 6. After churning out Black Ops Cold War in record time back in 2020, Treyarch had 4 years to put their noses to the grinder and work on what they wanted to do with Black Ops 6. So while they were busy with the new movement system, multiplayer design, and zombies, sister studio Raven Software got to work on the campaign. After the stellar job they did on Cold War's campaign, it seemed like the story of Black Ops was in safe hands, and this time they had more time to work on it to boot. Unfortunately, I'm not quite sure that time was completely well spent. While the Black Ops 6 campaign is far from the bottom of the barrel of CoD campaigns that I've covered, I feel that it has some major flaws in it that hold it back from reaching its full potential from a storytelling and gameplay perspective. So, just in time for Call of Duty to jump back to the future in Black Ops 7, let's take a look at the recent past with Black Ops 6. Our story begins in early 1991 during the last few weeks of the Gulf War. We meet new characters Troy Marshall, Jane Harrow, and play as William Case Caladrun. These 3 operators work for the CIA and are in Kuwait to pick up intel from an informant that works for Saddam Hussein that's trying to flee the war. When the informant is secured, a third mysterious force shows up. The informant says they're a heavily armored group known as the Pantheon, and without any other options, our characters fight through them to escape. Just as they reach the way out though, a familiar face shows up and executes the informant. Returning from Cold War is CIA hardman Russell Adler, who apparently has been on the run for the better part of a year for supposedly turning traitor. But not all is as it seems.
Alawi can't fall into the Pantheon's hands, or Langley's. The CIA is compromised. But it's not me, I'm just the fall guy.
You expect us to believe that? Hey Jane, you wanna tape his mouth shut for me?
Yes.
Wait, I got a message for Woods.
Oh yeah?
Tell him Bishop takes Rook.
Back in the States, Marshall, Harrow, and Woods are grilled by the head of the CIA, who reveals that it was Adler who sold out Hudson, Mason, and Woods in Panama during the flashback missions of Black Ops 2. Given the situation, the team is suspended from the CIA, but that's obviously not going to stop them from investigating the Pantheon further. To do so, Woods takes Marshall to Bulgaria to a site known as the Rook, an ex-Soviet safe house. Like in Cold War, the Rook serves as the hub in between missions, allowing you to upgrade your character, upgrade the base itself, and interact with the other characters as well. This location is really cool, as it's much expanded on compared to the safe house in Cold War. As the player collects more allies in their fight, more and more rooms become filled with them, and giving you more people to talk to and secrets to unlock. There's even a series of puzzles to solve, with a little mini side story that has ties all the way back to the original Black Ops. While nothing groundbreaking, all of this does add a good amount of substance to the story and gameplay that I really appreciate. But moving on to the story, Woods and Marshall are dubious about the idea of Adler being a traitor and track down some leads. They come across one, an assassin for hire named Savati Dumas, in a city known as Avalon. Notes from Adler reveal that she'd been helping him, so Woods and Marshall track her down so they can find out more information on the Pantheon. As Case heads to Avalon, this mission introduces us to one of the defining features of Black Ops 6, in that most of the levels have some form of open non-linearity to them. While most are not as open as Modern Warfare 3's open combat missions, Black Ops 6 does give you plenty of options on how you want to handle a problem. Here in Avalon, you'll mostly split your time between trying to stealth your way through your objectives or not caring and just going in loud. In a lot of ways, this is a natural continuation of the gameplay elements present in Cold War. So while in Avalon, Case helps Sev kill a trafficker and infiltrate a meeting with a bunch of criminal lieutenants. Of course, that really doesn't end too well for them, which causes a chase through the city that ends with some explosions and a burning limo. So with Sev now part of the team, she tells the group what she knew from Adler. Being the paranoid fellow that he is, Adler suspected that the CIA had been compromised by Pantheon and was investigating them when they framed him for the Panama disaster. Now that he's in CIA custody, the likelihood of him simply disappearing one night is likely, so a rescue operation is required. The team enlists the help of ex-Stasi enforcer and tech genius Felix Newman to help find Adler, and where he does find him proves to be tricky. Adler is locked up in a CIA black site under Union Station in Washington, D.C. Further complicating matters is that on the night they need to spring Adler, there's a campaign fundraiser for, at the time, Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton. The team uses this to their advantage, as one of the attendees is a senator who has access to the black site. Case then has options, as he has 3 different paths to take to complete the needed objective. For my playthrough, I approached the senator directly, which involved a lot of sneaking, subterfuge, and picking pockets. Finally, in a meeting with the senator, he proves to be very corrupt and seems to have no problem leaving his men to do the dirty work.
Boys, it's all yours.
Go!
With the thugs dispatching the senator's ID in hand, Marshall and Case break into the black site, only to discover they're not the first to do so. Pantheon has beat them there, undoubtedly trying to silence Adler, so Marshall and Case sneak their way past all the bad guys to spring Adler from his predicament. Not that it seems like he really needed much help.
Easy, Adler. We're here to help.
Guess Woods got my message.
The old man says you're worth it. Better be right. Sev, we got the prize.
Good. Now get out. Fast. We've got party crashes up here.
Great. You good to go?
Am now.
With Adler in tow, Case and Marshall fight past the Pantheon soldiers and use some very patriotic bikes to escape the area. But since that's anything but subtle, the CIA has now put a target on the team's back, blaming them for the whole mess. Thankfully, Adler has their next target, one of Saddam Hussein's palaces in Iraq. In said palace is supposed to be a dangerous new weapon that Pantheon wants. The problem is, because there's always a problem, is a little international trouble known as Operation Desert Storm. The palace where the weapon is has been targeted for bombing, so the clock is ticking for our team to get in and grab the weapon before the whole thing goes up in flames. Adler reaches out to Helen Park from Cold War and says she can help, but for a price. That price is the team's assistance in destroying various missile launchers scattered around the desert. This is another large open-ended mission, and of the whole game, this one really feels like it's just here to pad out the runtime. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, so to speak, but after all the complaining in 2023 about the open combat missions in Modern Warfare 3, this does feel a little similar to that concept. Now I will say, it helps that this is a map built specifically for this mission and not just an obvious reuse of Warzone assets like in 2023's campaign. But even still, there's plenty being reused here if you're paying attention. The crashed helicopters left over from Modern Warfare 2, weapon lockers and stuff are pretty much just reskinned from how they worked in Modern Warfare 3, and the way Case uses certain kill streaks with the laser designator is how those things have worked since Modern Warfare 2019. But I'm not going to be too nitpicky or gripey about this. As I said a minute ago, the map is brand new, so while it's populated with familiar stuff if you're paying attention, the play space itself is new and interesting to explore. There's lots of verticality to it, as there's plenty of hills to climb and gullies to find yourself in. There's never a moment I found myself bored during this mission, and enjoyed listening to the conversations between the characters in the car as we drove around. It was much better than just hearing someone over the radio every now and again telling you to hurry it up.
Without those trackers, we're never going to see those missiles again. Keep pressing, Kilo.
While extremely similar to how Modern Warfare 3 handled a good chunk of its campaign, this one works because it's clear Raven had the time to actually work on it and flesh it out enough. The fact that you even have other squad members with you automatically makes this better than the open combat missions, so while I've critiqued this mission slightly, it still gets a pass from me. If you're going to include a mission like this in the campaign, this is the better way to do it, but I still find it funny that it didn't get cut after Activision saw the reaction to Modern Warfare 3's attempts at this same format. So, moving on, after some driving and shooting to destroy the launchers, Park and the SAS help Marshall, Adler, and Case assault Stomp's palace to locate Pantheon's mystery weapon. The weapon, as it turns out, is a bioweapon called the Cradle. Adler finds a folder with information in it that says a former Soviet scientist has been working on the weapon, but he didn't create it. Its origin lies in the United States. So Marshall, Sev, and Case head to the lab in Kentucky where it was created, only to find it abandoned after a biohazard accident. Due to the building's derelict nature, Case falls through the floor in the elevator shaft and finds himself in the basement with the biohazard and a broken gas mask. It's here that Case's mind and the story fall apart. For the next hour or so and change of the game, Case has to struggle his way through the facility while under the effects of the Cradle. During this time, Case hallucinates mannequins coming to life and attacking him, or at least that's how it starts out. I would have been fine with the mannequins, especially given the cool Weeping Angel style segment where they only move when you're not looking. For a Call of Duty campaign, that's somewhat stylish and unique. However, this level very quickly takes things too far and transforms those simple mannequins into zombies.
Wasp is a CV-7 out in the Solomon Islands.
Oh, God, I'm sorry. Am I still here?
If you watched my Black Ops 4 review, you know how I feel about zombies in Call of Duty. I don't like them. I think Treyarch focuses on them too much, and they should just make zombie games instead of Call of Duty because that's clearly what they're really passionate about. But for the most part, I've tolerated zombies because at least there's a separate tab on the menu that I can just ignore and don't have to bother with. Welp, not this time, because now my historical fiction spy thriller story has been infested with the Walking Dead. I'm not joking when I tell you that I actually paused the game and put down the controller for a few minutes to just groan. But the zombies are only one of 3 problems with this level. They also include a grappling hook for some advanced movement, and I have to question how this even works. Based on the setting, I'm led to believe that most of this level is supposed to be happening in reality, and Case is merely hallucinating the things attacking him. So the grappling hook I find very weird and don't like in the slightest because what does this mean is really even happening? Is Case actually using a grappling hook to jump around, or is he just laying on the floor drooling and imagining all this? It doesn't make sense, and I hate it. However, that's really a nitpick compared to the last major issue of this level. While I dislike that they dragged zombies into this, even if they're just hallucinations, the bigger issue is the story implications this level introduces to Case. As he explores the facility, Case uncovers that he was essentially Patient Zero and caused the outbreak that led to the place being abandoned. This serves as our twist in Black Ops 6, as apparently all of these games need to have a twist for some reason. There being a twist at the end of Black Ops 1 is cool because it was a fresh idea for that story and because it was handled well. The game plays Reznov's appearances straight for the most part and doesn't totally tip its hand that something is up with him unless you're really paying attention. But now that we're in our 6th main entry in this franchise, the fact that there's a twist isn't a surprise anymore, limiting its effectiveness. Black Ops 1 has the Reznov twist, Black Ops 2 has Salazar's betrayal, but that's kind of understated. Black Ops 3 pulls a Sixth Sense on you, the twist in Black Ops 4 is that someone actually thought it was a good idea to include the material they wrote in that game period, and Cold War has the Bell twist. Clearly, Raven is trying to mimic in 6 what they did with Bell in Cold War, but there's several issues with the execution of that this time around. But for now, I'm going to have to move on so I can explain why this is such a problem later. So for now, we're just stuck with the silent protagonist fighting against hordes of zombies and other eldritch abominations in what's supposed to be a military fantasy game. Yay! Finally though, Case manages to get clear of the gas and is rescued by Marshall and Sev, who have found the intel on the Cradle they were looking for. Back at the Rook, the team digs through the info, which includes old security tapes of the Cradle's testing by Pantheon. While watching, the team discovers that Jane Harrow isn't just on them, but she seems to be given the orders as well. While the team doesn't take this well, they don't have much option but to press on with the mission to take down the Pantheon. Felix continues digging through the intel, and he and Sev discover that the Pantheon has been funding their operations through laundered casino money in Avalon. So the team plans to break into the vault, open the Pantheon's safety deposit box, and use the wire transfer information inside to locate the scientists responsible for weaponizing the Cradle. After having to suffer through a whole level of zombies, this is much more like it. Every member of the team gets involved here to pull off the heist of the century. Marshall hits the casino floor first as Sev goes undercover. As Marshall plays a few games of cards, Case sneaks his way underneath the casino to tap into their security system, giving Woods a look inside. Through those cameras, Woods helps Marshall cheat at cards and win access to the high roller area. Once in there, Marshall uses a distraction so Felix can sneak into the back and hack into their system. After Felix is done with his part, he passes the card off to Sev, who sneaks into the armory so everyone can arm up for the final part of the mission. And once assembled, Marshall's 5 blow up in the vault, allowing Felix to hack into the room with the safety deposit boxes. As Sev and Marshall cover him from the oncoming waves of underworld security, Case makes his move and gets to the objective. Case grabs a dossier and the crew fights their way out of the casino in a show-stopping firefight. Armored riot shield baddies even show up requiring different tactics to take them down. This level is fantastic. It's segments like these that Call of Duty campaigns really excel at when they take the time to get it right. From the silent infiltrations to the switching perspectives to the all-out gun battle at the end, it's a perfect send-up to Ocean's 11 and Mission Impossible type movies, and it fits right in for a story like Black Ops. Afterward, it even leads to one of my favorite character moments in the game as well. Once back at the Rook, Sev and Felix have a conversation about the heist. An important note about Felix: after his time with the Stasi, he swore off all forms of violence, and the only breaking he did was breaking into computer systems. This pacifist nature is directly in contrast to the casino heist, and even if you manage to sneak past the guards during this segment, I did not, he's still forced to participate in the gun battle at the end, and also brutally beats up a guard by the vault before then. These actions prompt Sev to commend Felix for his actions, while Felix can't help but feel sickened by what happened.
You were impressive today. Finally, the legendary Felix Newman in action.
Yes.
What's on your mind?
I need to make a confession. I am deeply ashamed of my actions in the casino.
You take this non-violence thing seriously.
Quite. But then I saw the Lutazzi thugs beating a defenseless man mercilessly, a senseless act of power.
No one is innocent in that city.
Afterwards, when I encountered the guard outside the vault, I lost control.
Good. It was probably less than what he deserved.
If I lose myself to this endeavor, I am no better than the very enemy we seek to stop, yeah?
Save your pity for the victims. You did what was needed to be done.
No. My reaction was catharsis and indulgence.
Harrow and the Pantheon won't be stopped with kind words and gentle attitudes.
There is always a choice, Savati.
Not always.
For two people that come from similar worlds, I loved hearing them delve into their differences of opinion on the job that they share. Both are making attempts to leave their violent past behind, but they're going about that in radically different ways. It's not the deepest of conversations, but I love that the game makes the attempt to flesh them out just enough so you can fully understand where they're both coming from. That's what helps make the Safe House hub so great, is that it really helps give extra depth to characters that otherwise would have probably just been yelling action dialogue during gunfights. And it's more proof that these games can go deeper with their story and characters and do it well, so it's a shame that they either deliberately choose not to or mess it up. Getting back to the main story though, Adler's discovered where the chemist in charge of the cradle is. He's on the run in Kuwait in the middle of Operation Desert Storm. To get to him in the middle of the war zone, Adler enlists the help of his old friend Sims, now a captain in the army after disagreeing with the way Adler handled things in the CIA. Sims says he can get Adler and crew close to his location at the Kuwait airport, so they head in to find him. While they don't have much issues finding him, getting there is another matter, as the airport is overrun with Saddam Hussein's forces and Pantheon guards. The fighting even makes its way onto a parked plane, one that turns out to be a decoy. Without any other options, Adler, Sims, and Case commandeer an Iraqi tank and use it to push their way to the other side of the airport where the real target is. After an over-the-top but exhilarating ride through the terminal, Case shoots down the plane just as it's about to take off. After a very persuasive conversation, Adler gets the next bit of intel they're looking for. Of all places, Pantheon is ramping up production of the Cradle at Vorkuta, the same Soviet prison camp where Alex Mason was brainwashed by the Dragovich back in the 60s. The team heads to Russia, and while the camp may be under new management, it's not any less dangerous. Sev heads in on her own first and slinks around the base sabotaging different defenses and learning little bits of intel to help her out. Once that's done, the cavalry comes knocking. In a very satisfying moment, it's great to see all of their defenses fail at once, basically allowing the team to stroll in. The same defenses have their tracking data messed with, causing them to spin out of control and hit random targets. Meanwhile, the helicopter defense's fuel supply goes bad, causing it to crash. Once on the ground, the team fights their way across the same grounds Reznov once led his uprising, and they find Harrow in the midst of all the madness. As she monologues to Case, Marshall slings in a flashbang and they manage to capture Harrow and take her back to the Rook. That proves to be a mistake, as, surprise, the scary CIA lady has a tracker on her that leads the Pantheon straight to where she is. While most of the team defends the Rook from Pantheon's assault, Harrow is injected with a cocktail of mind-controlled drugs and interrogated. Harrow is then taken on a trip into her psyche, and her backstory starts unraveling. Her parents worked for the CIA and were killed one night by an agent. After being witness to her parents' deaths, she followed in their footsteps and joined the CIA herself. As years went by, Pantheon approached and recruited her with the promise that they'd tell her who killed her parents, eventually telling her that Adler was the one responsible. Under the influence of the drugs, though, Harrow begins to see through the lies and fights back against her darker self. Now, this level of being trippy I don't really have an issue with for a couple reasons. While I didn't care for the zombies and the advanced movement in Case's hallucination since it was supposed to somewhat be taking place in reality, Harrow's little trip is totally inside her mind. You want to get trippy here? Let's get trippy. They even reused the zombie code on Harrow's character model to have Harrow attack herself. That, I think, is great, so kudos to the design of this mission. This one does it right, and it's all about the context. While dealing with her split personality, Harrow reveals that the Pantheon's plan is to stage a false flag attack on DC using the Cradle and blame Saddam Hussein, giving the US the push it needs to take the Middle East by force and establish itself as the one and only unstoppable superpower on Earth now that the Soviet Union has crumbled. While Harrow may have let slip what her plans were under the influence of the drugs, they wear off soon enough as Pantheon forces breach the Rook and rescue her. Not ready to call it quits so soon, Case makes it to the escaping helicopter just in time and jumps on board, causing it to crash in the struggle. As the helicopter sinks into a nearby lake, Case uses the sample of the Cradle taken from Iraq to beat Harrow, exposing both of them to it. The last we see of them is Case giving into the rage of the bioweapon as the helicopter sinks. There's still an epilogue to discuss, but for all intents and purposes, that's where the game ends, and I think it's an incredibly weak ending. The biggest issue is with Case, as so much of the game rests on him, but the team at Raven don't pull off this story well at all. As mentioned earlier, they are trying to recreate what made Bell's story interesting in Cold War, and do the same thing here, but I don't think they really understood why that story beat worked. For starters, what made Bell an effective twist in that game is that it doesn't happen until the end of the story. It mirrors Black Ops 1 in that the entire game plays Bell's inclusion in the story straight until the big reveal where you're then forced to re-evaluate the entire narrative and rethink everything you've done up until that point. That then helps you connect with the silent protagonist you're playing as, and really take ownership of the character as you then decide if you want to do the right thing or get revenge on the people you now know tortured and brainwashed you. The questions you have about Bell are presented and then answered over the course of an entire level, helping to lead to a satisfying conclusion. The same is not true for Case. For starters, instead of keeping Case's involvement with Pantheon secret, the game teases it right from the get-go to make it painfully obvious that something is up with him.
That us?
No, not Iraqi either.
Pantheon.
We need to leave. You won't stand a chance against them.
Every time the Pantheon is mentioned around Case, there's an echoey sound and a ripple effect on the screen, and the game does this in the first 3 minutes when you're extracting the informant out of Kuwait. I was flabbergasted. I could not believe that they had just tipped their hand to the twist that early in the game. But that early on, I trusted that they had a good reason for it, and so didn't rush to conclusions that the game was in trouble. Sure, they might have just tipped their hand, but maybe there's a really satisfying conclusion in store going forward. Like, maybe Case is the mole in the CIA, and you play as him for 2/3 of the game until the reveal, and then finish up the game as Marshall or something. That could work, especially since outside of Menendez and Black Ops 2, you don't ever really get to play as the villain in these games. But the game doesn't go in that direction or anything. Instead, Harrow is revealed as the villain, more on that in a moment. So throughout the course of the game, you play as an entirely mute character that you know something is up with, and then halfway through, all the answers to questions you weren't really asking are answered for you, which then presents you with new questions that are then never answered. Okay, so Case was a human lab rat who accidentally caused the big bioaccident and then got amnesia? How does he feel about that? How does that affect his standing on the team? Does that give him any insecurities that could help us connect more to his character? Does he have a crisis of conscience? Does he actually remember his time being experimented on? After learning things about Case, it really highlights how little we actually know about him. He's a non-character, and part of why I don't think we should be using silent protagonists in games like this if they're going to be that important to the story. Having a silent protagonist works for RPGs and other such games because there's often 1,001 choices to be made, so you, as the player, are literally making every decision for them. Your character doesn't have a voice because you speak for them. But in a game like Call of Duty, there aren't usually any huge, wild, crazy alternative choices to make. While Case does have dialogue options, none of these alter any story beats or help us learn more about Case as a character. Usually it only helps us learn about the other characters. I hesitate to even call Case a character in the first place. We know nothing about him, not even what he's feeling. Most of the time the other characters tell him what he should be feeling instead.
Good to see you up. I imagine that bender you were on is still taking a toll.
Case is such a non-character, he doesn't even mention what happened to him or his worries to his teammates, which is stupid. The game does attempt to handwave this, as after the mission in the basement, there are some dialogue options to bring up to the others, but if selected, a little voice tells you to keep it to yourself and not to mention it to the rest of the team. I could maybe accept that if we knew more about Case and if he was worried about how the team would react to his discovery or something, but as is in the game, they really just make you keep it a secret for what seems like no reason. It's a shame that Raven chose to go this route, because literally the whole game hinges on Case, but because we know nothing about him, the ending isn't satisfying in the slightest. I feel nothing that Case manages to stop Harrow with the irony that is beating her with her own bioweapon. Instead of Case being the protagonist, it should have been Marshall. Despite Case being central to the whole plot, Marshall is often treated as the main character. As Woods' protege, we see him learning and coming to grips with how the world of black operations often work. When Harrow is revealed as the true threat, he's the one that takes it the hardest, as they were close. Everything about Marshall is tailor-made to be a good protagonist for this story, and what we do get of him, I really like him. He's cool, he's smart, charismatic, but isn't infallible either. He's an easy-to-root for protagonist. So why Raven decided to make Case the main playable character is beyond me. Case doesn't even appear in the cinematics and is rarely even mentioned in them, making him feel like even less of a character. You know what? I'm just going to say it now. Case isn't a character at all. He's an interactive plot device. A better solution to this issue would have been Raven making Marshall the main playable character and Case being a comedic relief character, something that turned out to be Harrow's bowl in the team because she brainwashed him, with the gameplay swapping between Marshall and Case depending on the level. As for Harrow, she's fine as a twist villain, but not the best. While I think her backstory and motivations work and I like her split personality stuff, I still have questions. Supposedly, she's a pretty high-ranking member of the Pantheon, giving her some sort of operation control over the group. So if that's the case, how the heck did she get assigned to the mission at the start to rescue the informant? Pantheon wanted to control that information about the Cradle badly enough that they sent in a whole team to get the informant. Harrow, a top-ranking Pantheon member, is on the mission to get him herself. Was that just an unfortunate accident that Director Livingstone assigned her and Troy to that mission instead of some other team? Did she want to oversee things herself? If so, why order a squad to come in and extract the Iraqi informant? The reveal of Harrow as the main villain means that this first mission now makes zero sense whatsoever. Also, while I can buy Harrow killing her own men to keep her cover, I find it strange that they're willing to shoot and kill her during the same mission. Like, they have to know who she is, right? So overall, while the campaign has some cool parts to it that are well made, the whole thing just falls apart by the end and doesn't have a satisfying conclusion at all. It's really unfortunate because the marketing did a pretty good job selling the story and I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. Based on the trailers and the behind-the-scenes stuff, you would have thought the story was more about a big global conspiracy that involved all of the world leaders at the time. The tagline of the game was even "The Truth Lies," insinuating that the power players responsible for what we consider to be truth were all liars. Like, Bill Clinton, Margaret Thatcher, George H.W. Bush, Saddam Hussein are all in this trailer talking cryptically like they're keeping some big secret. Activision was very eager to talk up the history of the 90s and the pre-release cycle, talking about how much of that era influenced the game's story. And yeah, it's in there a little bit, but nowhere near as much as it is in prior Black Ops games. Cold War was dripping in history. President Reagan had several big appearances, Gorbachev was in it for a bit, and there's even missions set in places like East Germany. It really used the setting of the Cold War in the 1980s well. The original Black Ops is much the same. Cuba, Vietnam, Cambodia, JFK, Robert McNamara, Fidel freaking Castro. They took the early to mid-1960s and dumped everything they could into that game. Even Black Ops 2 uses history better. Noriega in Panama? How many people of a certain age even know that's a thing that happened thanks to Black Ops? I certainly do. Now, what does Black Ops 6 give us? Well, we do get to visit some Gulf War locations, so that's neat, but that's about it. For as much as they talked up important historical figures, George H.W. Bush is heard in archival recordings, I'm pretty sure. Saddam Hussein is mentioned a ton but never appears, and Bill Clinton gets one non-speaking cameo at his fundraiser. Which, given how little that really mattered, it could have been Senator Jerkface's fundraiser and it wouldn't have changed the story any, so that tells you how important his inclusion in the game was, other than so people could snap and point at the TV to go, "Hey, that's a president!" The game spends more time in the fictional city of Avalon than it does in any real-world location as well, which I think kind of says a lot. It kind of baffles me that this is from the same team that made Cold War, but in doing some research, it seems like David Goyer wasn't involved at all, so I suppose I shouldn't be too surprised. All the other writers that I could find credited for the game seem to have been junior writers doing background stuff on the prior Black Ops games, or they don't have any other writing credits that I could find. Not to disparage them too much, because like I said, there is good stuff in this game that's enjoyable that I wish there was more of. It's just that the main arc really misses the mark and falls flat, which is a shame. And unfortunately, the epilogue doesn't make up for that rough ending either. 2 weeks later, the team meets up with Director Livingston, who offers apologies and says he wants the team to keep doing what they're doing to root out the last of Pantheon. The game then ends on an ominous note as we see that Livingston's aide, who only appears in one other cutscene at the beginning of the game, is part of Pantheon and up to something bad. Clearly this is supposed to lead into the seasonal content, which could maybe salvage the story? So let's see what happens season to season. Well, the first season deals with overthrowing the Avalon cartels to take away Pantheon's money. Okay, fair, I guess. Then season 2 has purple teleporting ninjas coming after the Black Ops unit for invading Avalon. Okay. Season 3 then shows us that Hudson was onto Pantheon, and that's partly why they compromised the Panama mission to shut him up. Okay, that's a cool bit of lore, I guess. But then the next season shows that Adler has kept Stitch from the Cold War post-launch story locked up for 10 years, and they use him to hack into the Pantheon servers and dox all of his members. Sev then leaves the team now that Avalon is up for grabs, and the last season is about mopping up loose ends after the team is officially reinstated. So not much by way of actually continuing the story in any meaningful way. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. It's a shame because Black Ops 6 had lots of promise, but overall I think it's an average campaign at best thanks to mostly in part some good level design here and there. I was also surprised by how much I liked the characters. Marshall was a cool Jack Ryan-ish character, Felix had a little bit of an interesting arc, and while she's pretty much just a Black Widow with a similar origin to boot, I really ended up liking Sev too. These characters were all written and acted well enough that they felt like they meshed in the world of Black Ops well, and I enjoyed my time with them. So it's weird that the game got them so right and then messed up on Case and Harrow, who are the most important characters in the story. The reveal that Harrow is a traitor also doesn't have much oomph to it because I feel like you don't see much of her in the first act and then we're supposed to be shocked when she turns out to be the bad guy. For as much as the game does right, it also has some huge stumbles, which makes the game feel like it has a bit of a split personality. There's still fun to be had, but ultimately the game just didn't know how to properly pull off its twist well and left things on a weird and ambiguous note. Now I will say, Black Ops 7 is being referenced as being a direct sequel to both Black Ops 2 and 6, so it's possible that some of the hanging plot threads from this game might be addressed. Is all that red mist that's causing hallucinations a new form of the Cradle? Is this tech CEO going to turn out to be Harrow's daughter? Will she be using a brainwashed Case to impersonate Raul Menendez to terrorize the world so they'll buy her weapons? The wait to find out is almost over, for me anyways, since I'm finishing up this video a few weeks before the game launches. You can probably watch all the cutscenes on YouTube right now since this video is going up the same day 7 comes out. I will eventually get around to looking at Black Ops 7's campaign, as at this point I feel honor-bound to do it just so I can see all the updated thumbnails in my playlist. Until then though, I'll probably see you guys on the battlefield.